All right, it would not be a show if we didn't have technical difficulties coming in. Coming in hot.
Hi, happy Sovereign Sunday.
Happy Sovereign Sunday.
Get it out.
Our name tags are backwards, but that's okay. You know who we are.
Oh, I thought we had corrected that.
No, apparently not. We could just switch plate. No, just kidding.
It's fine.
Welcome to the Sovereign Lovestream. Thank you for joining us. I'm Danny Panzella Velez.
I'm Vanessa Velez Panzella.
And we are so happy that you came to join us. You want to introduce today's topic?
Yes. All right. Well, let's see. We are talking this week about the lessons in shadow work that we experienced last weekend during the full moon eclipse. If any of you are familiar with astrology, with the energies that were present, there's Mercury in retrograde. There's lots of stuff going on in the cosmos, and that has brought up a lot of stuff for us. And one of the things about this work that we do is being aware of, thank you, is being aware of what energies are at play when we're doing this shadow work, when we're doing this healing work, when you know what's going on astrologically, when you know how these planetary movements influence us, you kind of it becomes a little bit easier to navigate the energies. It becomes easier to, he's like fixing all the lights right now. It becomes easier to navigate all of the emotions that come along with these energies, because regardless of whether or not you believe in astrology, we are all part of the greater whole, right? We are part of nature. We are part, like, it's all interconnected. Whether you want to look at it from a scientific perspective or from an energetic or emotional perspective, it is all interrelated. And so the more we're aware of what's happening and how that can influence us, the easier it is for us to navigate the energies, to navigate the emotions that come up. And when you're doing this healing work, sometimes it feels frustrating when you get caught up in something that you thought you had healed months ago, years ago, whenever. And so it comes back up again, and it can be overwhelming. It can be frustrating. But if you know what's happening, then it's a little bit easier to determine how you go from there. And for me, I guess my belief is that we do go through different layers of healing. So some stuff is going to come up from the past, and it's going to be just a deeper layer of that healing process. And if we look at it that way, it's a lot easier to flow with it than to resist it. Mm-hmm. Right?
I would like to, before we get into the specific energies of the blood full moon eclipse, let's talk a little bit for those who might be saying, "Oh, this is like woo-woo nonsense. There's no science here.
There's plenty of science.
The planets don't affect us." Let's talk a little bit about that. One of the things that I like to say, and Vanessa is much more an expert on this than I am, but one of the things that I usually say in response to that is, we know that the moon affects water currents on Earth, right? The gravitational pull and other, energetic frequencies that are coming from the moon affect the tides. We know that. That's accepted science. Well, if it affects the tides, and our bodies are 70% water, mm-hmm. do we think that the moon's energy might affect the water that's in our body? And if it's affecting the water that's in our body, what effects could it have? Could it have effects on our emotions? Could it have effects on physiological processes? Yeah. Right? So without getting too deep into the science, do you want to talk a little bit about that, aside from kind of that example?
I mean, I feel like you basically covered it. I don't think I have the capacity or the knowledge to really go deep into that topic. Thanks for calling me an expert, but
well, you tend to be an expert on the energies. So.
No, I mean, when you think about it, it is, if you really tap into all that is, all that exists, all of reality, it is all interconnected, right? A lot of people experience the winter blues. And why does that happen, right? It's because we're connected to the cycles of nature. And so when we pay attention to those things, a lot of our ancestors were really tapped into the different cycles and how those energies affect us. That's why ancient cultures did know how to work with the planetary movements. A lot of the agriculture in indigenous communities is based on astrology. It's based on the planetary movements, and they understand the effects that the planets have on our Earth, on our planet. And when you're able to recognize that, then, and if you're able to recognize how we are a part of nature, and how the cycles of nature affect us internally as well, then you're able to, it's all connected, I think.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Even the Farmer's Almanac is based on astrology, or astrological influences, right?
For sure.
And we accept the Farmer's Almanac as science, right? So why not?
Yeah, exactly. So it's difficult to separate ourselves from nature, because we are nature.
Amen.
And nature is us.
So let's talk about some of the specific energies of the blood full moon eclipse. You know?
I do. Well, I mean, I'm gonna speak about it from my perspective, and from the Toltec perspective, or the Toltec lineages. Eclipses are we're literally under the influence of the shadow of the earth, right? The earth is casting a shadow on the moon, which is why then it ends up looking red, or it looks different, because there's a shadow being cast on it. And in the Toltec traditions, when there's a shadow, then that's what we're looking at, our own shadow, where that energy does affect us, because then it's like our senses are different, right? Our senses have to adjust to this shadow being cast on the reality that we're used to seeing. And when that happens, it's going to affect our internal states. Our shadow is going to come out. We're going to experience it on a much deeper level. So I saw a post somewhere that was saying that, like, this full moon eclipse was going to be like, it was going to feel like the energy of 1,000 full moons, right? Because, full moons are about completing cycles. And so I believe this one was in Scorpio, if I'm not mistaken. And that I don't have much more information on, but I do know just the energies of eclipses and the full moons and how that affects us. And I mean, in terms of ending cycles, closing out cycles, and the energies of the shadows coming up, I felt like that was a huge theme in what we were experiencing. And I also work with the Aztec calendar, and in the Aztec calendar, last week Friday was the beginning of a 13-day period called Segali. So it was one house, and house in the Aztec calendar refers to it's multi-layered, right? It's a huge concept. So the concept of house is your physical home, like your house or your apartment or your bus or whatever it is that you live on, your physical body. And that is not just your meat suit, but also your energetic body, your emotional body, and then of course your connection to Mother Earth, right? That's also your home is Earth right now. So what the energy of house is about cleansing the home. It's a period of cleaning out that which no longer serves a purpose in your home. And that made a lot of sense to me when certain emotions were coming up, and I was like, oh, it's time to clear those emotions. And sometimes when we don't process them, when we're in this cycle of healing, we have a tendency to want to get over them quickly. And it's like, once I get over it, then it's good, it's gone. But when we don't allow ourselves to feel it, there's some of that energy that stays in your body. Your body keeps the score, right? So your body holds the energy of the emotions that you don't process. And when it's time to clear out the house, when it's time to do that cleansing and that decluttering, those emotions are going to come up again, and we're going to start feeling them. And it's time to allow them to to manifest, right? And once you're aware of that, that doesn't mean that you then throw temper tantrums and say, "Oh, I'm just feeling my feelings." You allow the feelings to come through, but if you have the proper tools, then you know how to let them flow. Right?
Yeah.
That makes sense?
And I think if you're doing that work, every time it comes up, it's a little bit of a deeper layer. And generally speaking, in my experience with this past eclipse, the feelings that came up were years old, but they were a lot less intense. They were kind of just like little thoughts that drifted through my mind. And then I had the choice to how I was going to respond to them, right? I could either accept them and integrate them and be like, oh, and we'll get into that in a minute.
Sure.
But you can choose to accept them and integrate them in the sense of like, oh, that old thought, I still believe that old thought, so I'm gonna go about my life continuing to believe that old thought, and then it gets to stay, right? Or you could say, oh, that popped up, I dealt with that, I released it. I guess there's still a little bit more of that energy within me, so I'm just going to release it. I feel whatever the feeling is, but I don't have to let it stay. I can just let it pass through me and just be like, okay, thank you. Thank you for whatever triggered you. Thank you for bringing that up. I release it and let it go, and we can move on, and then hopefully it purges, and maybe it'll come back again in another little teaspoonful.
as we go through these layers, it starts to feel more like the memory of a feeling, right? Where it's like, oh, I remember feeling that. That's interesting. And also, I think that yes, these feelings come up for exploration, and it's not a matter of just saying, oh yes, I release you and that's it, it's gone, right? There is still some processing in that, and I guess we can get into that.
That's what we'll definitely.
Sure. So
you want to start? I was thinking that just kind of the way it played out, I'll tell my story, and then
sure.
So last week I was in Texas. I flew down to Austin, Texas to participate in the Exit and Build Land Summit put on by the Live Free Academy. My good friend John Bush founded the Live Free Academy and the Exit and Build Land Summit. And I'm now doing social media for the Live Free Academy, which includes all of those brands. The Exit and Build Land Summit is basically, there were like 30 speakers. It was really an amazing conference. 30 speakers talking about everything from permaculture to using cryptocurrencies and decentralized autonomous organizations to organize intentional communities, homesteading, beekeeping. Like, it was a whole spectrum of talks and workshops about everything you could possibly want to know about exiting the city and building in the country, building an intentional community or building a homestead. Phenomenal conference. You can check that out at exitandbuildlandsummit.com. Little commercial there. No, it was really inspiring. And actually, they're doing an exit and build, a buy land, build community boot camp next week. So you can check that out. I'll put the link in the show notes so you can check that out if you're interested in that. That sounds good to you. Anyway, I'm down there at the conference, and I have this beautiful hotel room, a nice comfy bed, and all 3 days I was there. I got there on Thursday, and all 3 days I was there, I could not sleep. I was tossing and turning. I was having nightmares. One night, I'm not sure if I was awake or dreaming, but one night I was laying there and I looked down and the sheets were wrapping around my arms like vines and like restraining me. It freaked me out. I smoked a little. That did not help. I could not get to sleep. I just felt really intense. Walking around the conference, I was also having like these old feelings pop up, but I wasn't really, I was like, that's weird. So there was a time, you've heard me speak a lot about my mother wound and my sex addiction, how I grew up, just as a brief recap, I grew up believing that my mother was kind of aloof and didn't love me, or loved me to some degree, but didn't like me. I had some issues with her, and what ended up happening was I ended up sexualizing that perceived trauma and started looking for validation through women. And one of the ways I would do that was, how many women could I sleep with to feel worthy.
But I also think that it wasn't strictly validation through women. It was validation in general, because there were some other behaviors. I think some of the forms of activism maybe were also forms of validation, right?
For sure. And I experienced a bunch of those feelings. So I'm walking around the conference and, having feelings of like attraction towards women or things like that, like very low level, right? And I'm not justifying. If I had a high level feeling, I would just say it, but like, just kind of like this idea. And it reminded me of back in the day when I was in real estate, I would go to real estate conferences and look for who I could hook up with and things like that. That's what kind of the feeling reminded me of. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, why is this coming up now? But I was also having the same feeling with the speakers at the conference. I was like, oh my God, I want to impress the speaker. Like, I was looking for validation from these people that I look up to. And you could say it's natural and normal, and it certainly is. Having those feelings is certainly natural. But it reminded me and brought up the intense insecurities that I used to have, feelings of like really needing someone to approve of me. And if they didn't, I would go out of my way to like convince them why they should, or like I would like jump through all these hoops trying to get people's attention and validation. So even though maybe in and of itself, wanting someone you look up to approve of you may not be toxic or traumatic, for me, because I kind of had an addiction to that, or not kind of, because I had an addiction to that, it was a red flag for me, and it was a little jarring. Now, I didn't even realize that the eclipse was happening. I didn't even know about any of this yet. So you want to take it away?
Sure. So this was it's not the first time that Danny's gone away since we started our healing journey. But what I did realize was it was the first time he was going away to an event that in the past would have been an opportunity for him to seek validation. So, he's been going away to Sacred Sons retreats, and it's all men doing men's work. And so there's really nothing, no need to worry about having to trust him. It's not an exercise in my trust. And I realized after, I believe, the second day that I was like, oh, there's the difference here, because there was a part of me that in the beginning started to feel like at the end of the first night where I was like, oh, he's not home. There was a little bit of this, like, I miss him. And there was also a little bit of nervousness that I didn't know where it was coming from. I was a little bit surprised by it. And the second night, I wanted to have a glass of wine. And I hadn't craved alcohol in a while. It's probably been a few years where I've craved it, where I've wanted to have alcohol. I mean, we can go out to dinner and maybe have a drink, or we can go, usually it's like dinner, either Sunday dinner or we're having a date night and maybe we'll have a drink. But for me to be home and feeling like I want to have a drink for no reason was a little bit strange, and that should have been the first thing to alert me, but I kind of brushed it off like, okay, no, I'm not gonna, like, why do I need to have a glass of wine? That's weird. And I kind of just brushed that off.
Well, just for anyone new to the show who maybe hasn't heard our full story, back in the days when we had a toxic relationship before we started the healing journey, we were both kind of functional alcoholics, and we were numbing the pain we were going through with alcohol. So it was common for us to be at home drinking, like even just on a weeknight.
Yeah.
And not drinking to get drunk, but just enough to get a little buzz to numb
whatever uncomfortable feelings we were having in the moment.
Yeah.
And that's what it was, right? I was feeling uncomfortable, but I didn't want to face that. So there was this part of me that was like, just have a glass of wine and you'll be fine. And I was like, that's weird. I don't want to have wine. and it doesn't make sense. So I kind of just brushed it off. I went about my day. I took a nice relaxing bubble bath and you know, to practice some self-care, which is something that in the past I wouldn't have gone towards, right? I would have gone to the numbing by drinking alcohol. So it wasn't until about the second or third day that I guess you left Thursday. So Saturday is when I realized that I was feeling uncomfortable about him being away because he was at the conference and he was working at the conference. We weren't really texting as much. Usually when we're away from each other, we text each other often, we check in with each other, we ask how our days are going. And so sometimes I would text him and not hear back from him for a couple of hours because he was using his phone to record, or, you know, he was busy, right? So there was a little bit of that, like, oh, he's not answering me. That's weird. Why isn't he answering me? But it was very subtle. Like, it was almost like I could barely perceive that feeling was there, but I was definitely having these feelings of almost like, I don't know, sliding into a bit of a depression. And again, not extreme, just very like, I have no motivation. I just want to lay here and do nothing. And part of my intention while he was away was to rest, was to take a break, to relax, to practice some self-care. But I was feeling very unmotivated and I was having uncomfortable feelings and I wasn't sure why. So when I was, you know, I have on my planner, I have the days of the Aztec calendar written in my planner. So I saw that the Trecena had just started and I was like, okay, this is a time of cleansing the house. And I was really in an energy space of like, I want to clean everything. I decluttered a few things. I cleaned the apartment.
So much for resting.
But I did it, you know, I did it at a slow pace so I wouldn't overwhelm myself. But those emotions, then I realized, oh, there's something to those emotions. And then with the eclipse and the full moon, I started looking into what these energies were. And I realized, okay, yeah, this is shadow stuff. This is shadow work coming up. These old emotions that I haven't felt in a long time are here. And they're showing me that there's still an area within me that is feeling uncomfortable and insecure. There's a part of me that still feels somewhat insecure and even hurt by what happened in the past. So during our healing journey and through the years of us, you know, navigating the toxicity of our relationship, there were a lot of times when Danny would do things that would hurt me, would hurt my feelings, would make me like I would feel insecure because of some of his behaviors. And what would end up happening is we would talk about it and he would express some of his anxieties, some of his insecurities, and why he took those steps or why he went there. And I would empathize with him. And so I ended up pushing back my feelings like, oh, okay, this is about him. It's not about me. Okay, cool. Let's brush those feelings aside and let's help him navigate what he's feeling so that we can clear up this situation. And what happened is that little by little, those emotions just kept getting pushed away, tucked away, and not really dealt with. I dealt with them logically in that I could recognize, oh, this isn't about me. It's not about it, you know, it's not personal. If he's looking for validation elsewhere, it's his lack of feelings of worthiness. It has nothing to do with me, but I was still feeling stuff, right? I was still feeling hurt. I was still feeling insecure as a result of his need for validation. And so I still needed to process those emotions, and I wasn't processing the emotions, which is why they ended up coming up later.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going.
Good stuff.
So I was like, okay, I feel uncomfortable. I feel kind of icky. I don't like this feeling. I don't like that he's away. I don't like that sometimes he has a desire for validation, and that desire for validation in the past has caused him to disrespect our relationship. So it's understandable that I feel this way. It's understandable that these emotions are coming up, that these feelings are coming up. So all right, bring them on. And I allowed myself to feel it. And it was uncomfortable. I didn't like it. I really did want to have a glass of wine at that point, and I didn't. I said, okay, let's just feel it. Let's get through it. What does it feel like? And it felt, I think I felt hurt. I could feel some of the past hurt come up, where I was to the point where I almost felt angry. There was a moment where I felt a little bit of anger, where I was like, oh, that wasn't nice. That wasn't fair. Why did I have to go through, why did he have to be disrespectful in that way? Why didn't he deal with his issues of unworthiness before disrespecting our relationship? So there was a little bit of those feelings, which I allowed myself to express, right? To bring out, to explore. And I empathize with myself. Yeah, that wasn't fair to you. That wasn't fair to the relationship. Of course it was hurtful. Yeah, totally. And there was no, but look what happened. But look where that brought you. Yes, I already knew that. I've already felt over the years through this healing journey that our journey through the darkness, through the shadows, was part of this beautiful experience. And honestly, I would not trade that for anything. I don't wish that we knew what we know now back then. It's all in divine perfection to me. And I think that it was necessary to go through that darkness. Now that we work with other couples, it's easier to empathize with other people, right? There's nothing that a couple can tell us that we haven't already experienced. And so if everything at that least, we went through
at least energetically, right?
Yes.
Like, we may not have experienced the exact same details,
of course,
but we've gone pretty deep into toxicity. I mean, the alcoholism, the fighting, the throwing things at each other,
the disrespect,
dealing with the police, the cheating. Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've been through a lot of stuff. And, in some of the conversations that we've had with people that we've coached, the thing that they tend to say is, yeah, well, I'm glad that you guys have been through it and have healed, because why would I want to go to somebody that's never experienced this?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And for the fact that we've experienced a lot of these things enables us to build real, true, empathetic connection. We don't have to stretch to empathize, right? It's like, oh yeah, we've been there.
Yeah.
We've seen that. We've done that.
I've totally been in that energy.
Yeah.
I've totally been in that thought pattern, and I completely understand. So,
and it's very genuine, right? Because it's sincere, because we've experienced it. So it creates an instant connection with our coaching clients. And because of that, we're able to really help them.
Yeah. And so in this process, I remember, yes, I know that I had to go through that. I know this was part of my journey. At the same time, there's no reason to dismiss the emotions, because the emotions are also part of the journey. Without those emotions, there's no journey. So I have to feel them. I have to be willing and open to experience that, so that I can transmute that, so I can clear it. And I did. I went through it probably for a full day. And then I think on Sunday we had, we spoke about it a little bit on Saturday night.
Mm-hmm.
I expressed to Danny, this is what I'm feeling. I've been having some of these emotions, and, I understand this is, I'm meant to feel it. I get it. And then on Sunday was probably he was busier than the day before. So we barely spoke. I mean, we sent a couple of texts here and there, but every night we had been FaceTiming each other and chatting, catching up at the end of the day. And Sunday, it just got too late and I was exhausted. I ended up finally dozing off. And by the time he sent me a text, I was already asleep. And by the time I responded, he was already asleep. So we missed each other that day, which I think was perfect, right? In that moment when he said, oh, the next day he was like, I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk yesterday. I was like, no, it was perfect. I needed to go through that. I needed to go through those feelings so that I could transmute that, because otherwise he was just going to comfort me, which is great. That, you know, that's helpful too. And he did, when he came back, we had the conversation, and, you know, there's the comfort there, but I needed to allow myself to go through those emotions, because once I go through them, then they're free to go, right? When we suppress is when we hold the energy of those emotions in our bodies. That stuff gets stored in your physical body. And when you feel it, when you allow it to express, then it is cleared. It doesn't have, it's like when a dog shakes himself off after a little tussle, right? It's like the energy's gone. Okay, I release it. Boom.
It's like, it's a somatic release. And if you're interested in the science behind this, there's the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Who's the author of that?
I don't remember.
And also the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. He talks a lot about that, about how we take suppressed emotions, and when we suppress them, they end up getting stored in our bodies and lead to illness in different ways. So
Bessel van der Kolk is the author of The Body Keeps the Score.
Okay.
You can just search The Body Keeps the Score.
And so, you know, I had a decision. I could have, when she first started expressing to me, I guess it was Saturday night, the feelings that she was having, I could have gotten defensive. I could have said, what? I haven't cheated on you in years. We've healed. That's over. Why are you still feeling that way? You know, I could have been defensive about it. But to me, something clicked when she talked about what she was feeling and the eclipse that was coming. All of a sudden I was like, oh my God, that's why I've been having these nightmares. That's why I've felt so intense. That's why I haven't been able to sleep. These things were coming to the surface. The moon was messing with the water in my body and bringing some of these emotions out, right? And I'm glad I made the right choice and empathized and made that connection. And because then the following day, so now the next day, it was a really intense day. There was a lot of workshops that I was filming. And then at the end of the night was the after party. And the after party was on this beautiful property in Bastrop, Texas. And I had a beautiful, clear, the sky was so clear. I was able to sit and watch the eclipse happening live. I stayed through the whole eclipse. And I was able to do a meditation. So she was at home worrying or having the feelings about the fact that we hadn't spoken to each other all day, and the possible fear that I could be at this after party, you know, flirting with women or what have you. And here I was doing a meditation under the eclipse moon to release a lot of those feelings.
By that point, though, we were texting. So it wasn't like I hadn't heard from you at all. You did tell me that you were at the after party, and that you could see the full moon. And so I wasn't like in a panic over it.
No, I didn't mean that. I just meant that you were having those feelings.
Yes, I was still experiencing some of those feelings, because I think that's what was a little bit confusing for me, because I was in a place where I didn't have the fear that it was going to happen, but I had the feelings of when it used to happen. And that didn't make sense for a while. And I think that can be confusing. And that's part of the work of kind of being fully aware of what you're feeling, right? Because it could have very easily turned into, oh, I don't trust him. And it wasn't that I didn't trust. It was that the feelings from the past were coming up and it didn't make sense. And if I wasn't paying attention to it, it could have turned into, oh yeah, I don't trust him. Something's telling me something's wrong. And that wasn't at all the feeling. Once I really sat down with it and explored it and allowed it to flow, it was, oh, this is an old feeling. And I'm feeling kind of upset about the stuff that happened years ago. And then that's when my work comes in of allowing the cycles to help me, right? To guide me. Oh, this is the closing of a cycle. Got it. So these are emotions that no longer serve me. These are emotions from a cycle in our life that has already been closed out. And these emotions need to come up and be felt so they can be cleared. And now that cycle is closed. We don't need to worry about it. And that's not to say that we don't do the work to continue building our trust, to continue growing our relationship, but that part, those emotions, that gets energetically cleared from the body, that gets energetically cleared from the energetic, the emotional body as well. And so I was able to then also have my own little ceremony and set the intentions to release it. One of my Toltec teachers suggested that for this eclipse, to offer those old emotions, those old ideas, those old limiting beliefs back to the shadow of the moon, and to give it as an offering, right? You can offer these things back to Mother Earth, to the moon, to the earth, to the sun, to whatever is in motion at the time. And so I did set the intention. I offer you these old emotions. I thank them because those old emotions were trying to tell me that something was off in my relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Those old emotions had been there as a guidance system to say, hey, something's off here. This needs to be looked at. This needs to be fixed. At the time, I wasn't paying attention to the emotions and I was just drinking so that I wouldn't feel them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really what our emotions are. They're there to guide us to, all right, this is out of balance. This isn't in alignment with who you are. So let's clean it up. And if we don't pay attention to it and just suppress it, we continue living out of alignment and holding these emotions inside of our physical bodies as well as our energetic and emotional bodies. And that creates all sorts of chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think I don't even think I told you this, but while I was doing right after at the after party, everybody was out there looking at the moon. And well, not everybody. There were a lot of people who were kind of in the same vibration as us, spiritual and doing the work. And so there were a handful of us standing around, and I was talking to somebody about what I had just released about the meditation. And she suggested that I dance to somatically release. And like Vanessa mentioned earlier, like when a dog will shake it off, right? We have Cookie and we take him to the dog park, and sometimes he gets into scuffles with dogs. And you notice that when they get that adrenaline rush, the hair stands up on the back of their back like a little mohawk. They get all like hyped up, their hackles up, and then after when the danger has passed, they shake it out. If you've ever watched a nature documentary, you see the gazelle bounding across the plains, the lion's chasing them, and when they finally get out of the danger zone and they've outrun the lion, they do the same thing. They shake it all off. That's called somatic release. There's a lot of science behind that as well. You can look that up. And so I did. I danced. I jumped around a little bit. I shook my body to kind of help release any of those energies and just kind of somatically release. And while the energies are like churning inside of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're somatically releasing, if you're moving, that's why exercise is so important. Dance is a great way to do that.
Yoga, qigong, tai chi, all of that is a movement of energy in the body.
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I hadn't told you that. No. Yeah, so it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great things about, again, going back to knowing the energies that are at play in the moment, because if you don't know that, then these emotions seem weird, right? I could have been confused. Why is this happening? Why are these old emotions coming up? Am I not over it? Once you start recognizing, oh, we're closing out cycles. Oh, it's a sekali, which means we're cleaning out our home, our physical home, our energetic home. Okay, all of these things are happening, which means that these emotions are going to come up because they're meant to be cleared. We're closing out the cycle. It's a really intense and powerful one. So we're going to close out real intense and powerful emotions that we've dealt with over many full moons, many moons. And for sure, we had gone through so much trauma over the course of our relationship, and it was years of trauma. So it's going to take years of work to clear that trauma as well. And to not that it's going to take years for us to fully, to heal it, to feel the healing. But over the course of the years, we're going to have some of these little things that slip through the cracks, right? Little emotions that got suppressed here and there that we didn't really face at the time. And so when they come up, we can look at them, we can observe them, we can allow them to express, and then we can shake them off.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that I took away from last weekend, something that I believed already, but I feel like I integrated it a lot more, was that when a trigger comes up, it's like a warning. It's a message from your subconscious, right? And most of us, we kind of look at triggers as somebody's bothering me. Somebody did something that bothers me, rather than this is a message from my subconscious. What's the message?
Mm-hmm.
Let me figure out this message. Actually, and that brings up a good point. We just finished a book and we released it just recently. It's a free ebook, How to Work with Your Dreams to Integrate Your Shadow. And basically what it is we teach you different ways to look at your dreams, interpret them, to figure out what messages are coming from your subconscious through your dreams. And you can download that for free at healinyourdreams.com. If you want to check it out, it's got some really great Toltec wisdom. Vanessa put a lot of really great research into this book. And it's short and sweet, but some really powerful stuff in there. We've got dream journal pages that you can print out and use to journal out your dreams. And over the course of journaling your dreams for a while, you'll start to see patterns. And pattern recognition is one of the ways that you can start to interpret your dreams. So check that out, healinyourdreams.com if you're interested. Totally free.
And
our gift to you.
And if you know us, we're both I'm super into dreams. I tend to dream a lot, and I feel like my dreams are very significant, and they have had some very, I've seen them play out in very interesting ways. So yeah, definitely check it out. There are some really great practical tips in there. Our dreams are our subconscious mind, right? Our subconscious mind speaking to us. Sometimes our ego doesn't allow these messages to be understood, or even for us to pay attention to them, right? In the moment when I had the urge to have a glass of wine, my ego was like, oh, that's weird. Brush it off. It's no big deal. Whatever. Just either have it or don't, but it doesn't mean anything, right? My subconscious, when I really tuned into, okay, what is this emotion and why am I feeling it? I was able to realize, oh, I don't like the feelings that are coming up. And it should have tipped me off, because back then, that's why I wanted to drink. I wanted to drink to not feel the feelings that I was experiencing in the moment, because I was feeling hurt, because I was insecure. So now, being in this place where I was feeling uncomfortable and I didn't know how to deal with that, I, made the decision to, okay, let's look at it. And that's how you start noticing how your patterns are changing, how your healing work is manifesting, where these triggers come up and you have a different way of dealing with them. Like Danny said, he recognized, okay, wait a minute, why am I feeling this way? Old Danny would have felt that way and just run with it, right? Like, okay, yeah, let's get some validation somewhere. Who's available to validate me? But now we're able to pay more attention to the emotions. We're able to pay attention to the little triggers, to the little voice, the little shadow popping up and saying, like, get some validation.
And in the time that it was happening over the weekend, and while I was having these feelings, I started to judge myself. My ego was not trying to just brush it aside.
Yeah.
My ego was saying, oh, look, you haven't really changed. You're still having these thoughts. How much could you have possibly changed? How much work, how enlightened could you be if you're still having these feelings, like temptation, like wanting to flirt with a woman or something like that? Or, my ego didn't really have much to say about me looking for validation from speakers, because that is, it's not taboo in our society, right?
Right.
Even though it can be, toxic to a certain person. For me,
Yeah.
as a former addict of validation, it was toxic for me to, if I would have gone like, and wanted to jump through hoops to impress a speaker,
I think it all depends on where it's coming from, right? There's one thing for you to admire somebody and say, "Wow, I want to connect with this person," and I guess in that case, you wouldn't really be seeking validation, but you'd be wanting to connect with the person. And then another thing is to say, "Oh, I need this person to validate me so that I know that I'm worthy,"
Yes.
right? And that's why it's
Right.
really important to check in. Where is this coming from? What's my motive for wanting to do this? My mentor, Carla Mora, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago, says this a lot too. What's my motive for wanting to say this? What's my motive for wanting this or wanting this particular outcome? And when you check in with yourself that way, it's easier to start recognizing, okay, my motive is really, I genuinely want to connect with this person, or my motive is, I don't feel worthy and I want this person to validate me. And it requires you being really honest with yourself and really vulnerable. And it's easier when you do it in the moment, where it's like, okay, what's my motive? And then the first thing that comes up in your mind is like, oh crap.
And I think I want to go back for a second. So I started to judge myself for even having the little low level thoughts, right? They were like maybe at a 1 or a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10. But then I was able to tell my ego, like, yeah, but you noticed them. You didn't act on them. You didn't give in to them. You were able to observe them, and we released them. So look at the change in how you responded to those thoughts, as opposed to 6, 7 years ago, how you would have responded to those thoughts. So that is huge. And, not like pat myself on the back, but I can also appreciate the fact that I've changed, I've grown to that point where I can now, when a trigger like that comes up, I can integrate it and be like, okay, yeah, I can have that feeling, but I can release it, and I don't need to give into it or do something to, I don't have to react to it. And I think another point that I want to make is that that's tuning into your intuition. The messages from your subconscious, what's the phrase? What's the saying? As above, so below, right? So many people think that's like heaven and earth, and on some level it probably is, but I believe it's the distance between, or the referring to your higher self and your subconscious. And I really believe that your higher self communicates to you through your subconscious. And that's why it's so important to do all this healing work, because then the messages can come through clearer. You can hear more from your higher self, which is your intuition, right? The more work you do to heal, the more of these old toxic patterns that you release, the more in tune with your intuition you are, the more clearly you hear the messages, and the more happy, grateful, and joyful you can live. So I can be proud of myself for listening to my intuition, for really tapping into it.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes we forget that the healing doesn't mean that you never have negative or uncomfortable feelings, right?
Yeah.
The healing is in knowing how to process those emotions as they come up. So, that's a part of the work that we do, is teaching people how to work with those emotions, how to navigate them, how to tap into those emotions, how to work with them, right? How to let them guide you instead of resisting them, fighting them, judging them, but rather looking at them as guidance, right? If you're angry, there's something that's out of balance. So what's out of balance? Let's look at that, right? So that you're responding instead of reacting. It's okay to be angry. There's nothing wrong with it. Your anger is your fire energy, right? And it's okay to have that anger. How you express that anger is what, where we want to be more in alignment. And like I said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being angry. There's nothing wrong with being upset, being sad, or being insecure. Having feelings of insecurity just shows you there's a place within you that still needs healing. And when we're able to look at things in that way, then those emotions aren't scary anymore. We're not looking for ways to suppress them and
or run away from
them,
medicate them, cover them up.
Exactly. And so I think that was like a huge lesson for us during this full moon cycle where we were like, okay, these emotions came up and we both found ways to work with them, to look at them and say, okay, what's going on here? For you to connect, I haven't been able to sleep, I'm having nightmares, and then recognize the feelings of the need for validation, right? All of those things come together and you're like, oh, okay, this is my subconscious working here. My subconscious is trying to let me know. That's why even your nightmares are teachers. Your nightmares are messages as well. I keep a dream journal. I write down as much as I can from all of my dreams. I love going back and looking through my dreams to see what patterns, what things I dreamt about, and then make sense maybe a week or two later, sometimes a month later. I've gone back to dream journals from years ago, and it blows my mind every time I do that, because I'm like, holy cow, my dreams were trying to tell me stuff back then and I wasn't paying attention. So I'm a little bit more attentive now when it comes to dream work. But yeah, it's all like
a little bit.
Yes, a lot more. But it does all come back to us paying attention to our subconscious mind and seeing what it's trying to express to us.
Absolutely.
Do you want to talk about our couple circle?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I thought you were going to do it. If we wanted to let you all know and invite you to our Sovereign Lovers Integration Circle. We're not doing it monthly anymore. Now we're doing it twice a month.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So we are meeting twice a month. Different couples coming together, doing the work together, kind of seeing where we all are. It's sort of, I guess I would say it's kind of like a little support group in a way, right? Yeah. Couples work is hard sometimes. A lot of times it's very hard, and we don't often talk about that. And one of the things that I really struggled with during our very dark periods was the loneliness, feeling like I couldn't tell people what was going on, especially not my single friends. I felt like my single friends were going to judge me or judge you and say, just dump him and move on. Because that's the stuff that I would have said at the time too. And so it was really lonely to go through some of these things and not be able to share with anybody. And then as I started doing this work, as I started connecting with other couples, I started realizing, oh my God, almost everybody goes through very similar things. Mm-hmm. Not the exact same things, but very similar things. And so
really the core wounds, the core traumas, the core issues are all the same. Ultimately, most issues come down to feeling worthy.
Yeah.
If you trace it back deep enough, it's really about worthiness. And so everybody struggles with that. It's universal. And it just manifests in different ways in different people's relationships.
Different personalities acted out in different ways, mm-hmm. right? And so we're all kind of experiencing very similar core wounds, very similar traumas, very similar coping mechanisms. And so these couple circles have been really fun. Sometimes they're difficult and exhausting.
They get a little intense.
They get intense. But it's really nice to develop start growing this community where couples are meeting, getting to hear that we're all going through things at the same time. We're all struggling through it. There are people that are, longer, that have been on this path longer, and people that have, are just starting to dip their toes into this healing path. But we're all going through similar things, right? It doesn't matter where you are, you still experience similar triggers, similar disagreements, similar challenges within your relationship. And so to have this support group is really helpful. It helps relieve a little bit of the burden, right? So you're not feeling like, I have to deal with this all on my own. I have nobody to talk to. I can't really tell people because it's embarrassing or whatever. There's no embarrassment there, because we agree that it's a sacred container where we can all share and hold space for each other. So if you're interested, you can definitely check that out on our website, sovereignlove.nyc/lovers circle. And
if you sign up by June 1st, July 1st, I believe, it's $22 per month per meeting. And after that, it's going to go up to $44. But if you subscribe, you'll get the $22 price through the end of the year. So there's an incentive for you to subscribe. You're getting it for half price if you do that. I think also now would be a great time to mention our sponsor. We are sponsored by Brave New Botanicals. Here is a quick message from them.
Do you want free weed? Well, of course you do. John Bush here to tell you how to get it. My health supplement company, Brave Botanicals, is giving away a free 5-pack of delicious Delta 8 THC gummies. What's Delta 8 THC, you might ask? It's just like regular THC, except it's derived from the hemp plant. And the high you get from Delta 8 is much more mellow and calm without the anxiety or paranoia many people experience with regular THC. The best part is, thanks to a clever loophole, Delta 8 THC is completely legal at the federal level and is legal in most states, including many where cannabis is still banned. If you want to relax, get better sleep, and even relieve chronic pain, go to freed8gummies.com to get a free 5-pack of tasty Delta 8 gummies shipped to you today. That's freed, the number 8, gummies.com.
The raspberry gummies are my favorite flavor. As we've mentioned today during the show, we do relationship and psychedelic coaching. We offer free exploratory sessions. If you want to check that out, we can do a 30-minute consultation and we can help you set some goals for healing and develop a plan for you. Whether you decide to coach with us or not, that's yours to do with what you wish. And Vanessa does intuitive readings as well. She does tarot readings, Aztec birth charts, which are really helpful in determining some of the archetypes that are heavy in your personality. We also hold sacred ceremonies. We are going to be at the PorcFest Freedom Festival coming up next month, June 20th. That starts. That's in Lancaster, New Hampshire, for all the libertarians and free staters that might be watching. We'll be doing a whole bunch of workshops there, including a shadow work workshop. We're doing couple circles, men's circles. Vanessa's going to be doing a women's circle. Cacao and kava ceremonies. So we have a great action-packed schedule there. You can check that out at sovereignlove.com, sovereignlove.nyc/events. And, we have social media. We're on all the big tech platforms. You can follow us on those, but we also love to talk about the alternative platforms because, as we know, big tech is censoring people like crazy. If you do not have a mainstream perspective and they catch you, they sometimes determine you misinformation and they ban you. As a matter of fact, our last episode was flagged because we were talking about using mushrooms. And that's a great story. One of our clients had an amazing mushroom trip and then had a near-death experience 2 weeks later. And he talks about how his mushroom ceremony prepared him for that NDE. So you might want to go back and check that out. But anyway, Minds.com, Float.app, and Odyssey.com are 3 of the platforms we like to use that do not censor. They are privacy-centric. They do not sell your information. Minds.com and Float are both sort of like Facebook alternatives. They kind of have a similar feel. And then Odyssey.com is a video site like YouTube, but better. It is blockchain-based. So all of the videos uploaded to Odyssey are permanently on the blockchain. They can never be taken down or censored. So in the age of the Ministry of Truth that Biden just instituted and then had to shut down a few days later because there was so much public backlash about it, but they will be trying again. So don't be fooled into thinking we're safe from censorship. We certainly are not. So check out those platforms. Anything else before we sign off? Thank you so much for watching. We appreciate you and have a happy Sovereign Sunday.
Happy Sovereign Sunday.
We love you.
Yes.